The old tree's dry leaves trembled in the October wind, much like the unsteady footsteps climbing toward the worn-down house. Its exterior, once cheerful and bright, had surrendered to time, paint curling away from the siding with every soft gust. Peter Morrison raised his fist and knocked. 3 sharp raps that echoed through what sounded like an empty home. He waited. Only the rustling of leaves answered him. He knocked again, harder this time. "Is anyone here?" His voice carried an edge of nervous uncertainty. "Peter Morrison, First National Bank." When no answer came, he tried the knob. It turned without resistance. The door swung inward on rusted hinges, revealing a dim hallway choked with stacks of old newspapers and collapsed cardboard boxes. Dust drifted lazily through the pale light filtering through filthy windows. "I'm here about the foreclosure notice. I need someone to sign for these papers." Peter stepped inside, his black suit jacket grazing a coat rack buried under moth-eaten garments. The floorboards groaned beneath his shoes. From somewhere deeper in the house came the clang of pots and the rhythmic sound of a knife against a cutting board. "Hello? I can hear you in there." He navigated around a bicycle missing its front wheel and followed the narrow path through the living room, if it could still be called that. Towers of magazines leaned at precarious angles. Plastic bags of unknown contents lined every wall. The room looked less like a home and more like the inside of a forgotten mind. But then something extraordinary reached him. The smell. Rich, golden, intoxicating. Roasting meat. Fresh herbs. Something sweet and caramelized. Peter's stomach responded before his brain could. He followed the aroma through the debris until he reached the kitchen doorway and stopped cold. The room was immaculate. Spotless countertops gleamed beneath warm light. Copper pots hung polished and bright above a vintage stove. Fresh herb bundles dangled from wooden ceiling beams. Every surface held a perfectly prepared dish: green bean casserole crowned with crispy onions, sweet potato pie with marshmallows toasted to a flawless golden brown, cranberry sauce shimmering like rubies in a crystal bowl. What on earth? The oven door stood slightly ajar, spilling golden warmth into the kitchen. Peter drifted toward it, drawn by the smell alone. Through the gap, he could see the bronzed, glistening skin of an enormous turkey, juices sizzling in the pan below. A meat thermometer read exactly 165 degrees. Professional quality. Restaurant quality. He reached for the oven handle. The metal was warm against his palm. He pulled the door fully open. White light exploded from inside, blinding, total, overwhelming. Peter's hand fused to the handle as though it had always belonged there. Energy surged up his arm and spread through his chest like liquid fire, reaching every corner of his body simultaneously. He tried to scream. No sound came. His bones shifted. His frame narrowed. The gray dress pants split at the seams as his hips widened. His white dress shirt strained and then gave way, remaking itself around a body that was no longer his. His voice broke mid-cry and climbed 2 full octaves before settling somewhere warm and unfamiliar. The Adam's apple at his throat smoothed flat. The dark stubble on his jaw dissolved like morning fog. His short brown hair cascaded past his shoulders, lengthening and lightening simultaneously until it settled into rich auburn that caught the kitchen light like hammered copper. The foreclosure papers slipped from fingers that no longer gripped them. They scattered across the spotless floor. His black leather shoes became sensible brown flats. His torn dress pants became a knee-length forest green skirt that swished softly. The ruined dress shirt became a cream blouse with pearl buttons. "Stop," she heard herself say. "Please stop." But even as the words left her mouth, other things were arriving. Memories. The precise amount of sage that belonged in the stuffing. How long pie crust needed to rest before rolling. The exact moment to pull the turkey from the oven for maximum juiciness. Knowledge poured in like water filling a vessel, complete, detailed, warmly familiar. She blinked. Her lashes were long. When had that happened? The turkey needs basting. The thought arrived without effort. She was already reaching for the baster, hands moving with the confidence of years. She squeezed golden drippings across the crackling skin and felt, somewhere at the back of her mind, a smaller and smaller voice insisting that something was wrong. She had been Peter Morrison, loan officer, here to deliver foreclosure papers. But that memory felt like recalling a film watched long ago in someone else's living room. Distant, dim, already fading at the edges. She closed the oven door and moved to the stove. Carrots bubbled in butter and brown sugar. Perfectly done. She gave them a quick stir. The kitchen timer rang. Time for the rolls. She found the risen dough without searching for it, punched it down with satisfaction, and began dividing and shaping with hands that knew exactly what to do. Whose hands? She paused, flour dusting her fingers. The green skirt shifted around her legs as she turned, scanning the kitchen. Everything was in its place. Every dish was progressing on schedule. So, why did her chest feel tight? Because you're not supposed to be here, she said aloud. The words rang both false and true at once. Then the front door opened. Multiple footsteps in the hallway. Petra. We're here. In the kitchen. The response came before she decided to give it. 3 people emerged from the cluttered hallway, a middle-aged couple and a young man in his 20s wearing glasses. She knew them instantly, the way you know the rooms of your childhood home, without needing to think. Dorothy and Richard Henderson. Their son Michael. Her family. It smells absolutely incredible in here. Dorothy wrapped her in a warm hug, gray hair brushing Petra's cheek. You've outdone yourself again. Turkey's almost done. Maybe another 40 minutes. Perfect. Dorothy turned to her husband. Richard, help me clear the dining room. Michael, stay with Petra. They dispersed with practiced ease. Michael tied an apron around his flannel shirt and looked around. What needs doing? Mash the potatoes. They're drained in the colander. He added butter and cream without measuring, without asking. They had done this before. Many times. 13 years of Thanksgiving dinners arranged themselves in her memory. Each one in this kitchen, each one built around the same meal. You okay? Michael glanced at her. You look a little pale. She touched her cheek. Foundation. A touch of pink lipstick. Clear polish on nails that had somehow grown long without her noticing. I'm fine. Just been cooking since early morning. Mom says you started at 5. Someone has to cook, she said, or we'd all starve. The joke came easily, comfortably, the way a joke does when you've told it 100 times. More voices arrived at the front door. Extended family cascading in, Cousin Janet with her twin boys, Uncle George with his new girlfriend. The house filled with warmth and chatter, life breathing into corners that had been holding their breath. Dinner came together the way dinners do when they've been rehearsed across years of love and habit. The turkey emerged golden and perfect, garnished with rosemary and orange slices. The table sat 13, a number that felt significant in a way she couldn't quite name. They joined hands around the table. Thank you for this food, Dorothy said, this family and another year together in this wonderful old house. Amen. Plates filled. Wine was poured. Uncle George raised his glass. To our chef. To Petra. She smiled and accepted the toast, even as something deep inside her moved against invisible restraints. This wasn't right. Wasn't real. Wasn't. Pass the gravy? Michael nudged her shoulder. Sorry. Wool gathering. Conversation carried itself around the table, without her help. The twins had made the junior varsity soccer team. Janet had been promoted to regional manager. Uncle George's girlfriend was a pediatric nurse. Normal family news, 13 years of shared history woven through every exchange. But underneath the pleasant surface, questions multiplied quietly. Where had she been before this house? What job had she held? What was her last name? You're awfully quiet tonight. Dorothy studied her across the table. Not coming down with something? Just tired. Long day of cooking. Well, don't worry about cleanup. We've got plenty of hands. Go rest. She was guided gently from the dining room and found herself in the small bedroom off the kitchen. Impossibly clean, like the kitchen itself, an island of order in the otherwise cluttered house. The green skirt hung in the closet between similar outfits. The dresser held makeup and jewelry she recognized without remembering when she bought any of it. She sat on the quilted bedspread. Through the thin wall, her family laughed and clinked dishes and called to each other over the sound of running water. Her family. When had they become hers? The foreclosure papers materialized in her hands, brown at the edges now, crumbling. Peter Morrison. First National Bank. The name felt like reading an inscription on an ancient gravestone. I came here to take this house. But the house took me instead. The papers crumbled to dust between her fingers and disappeared into the cracks between the floorboards. The last physical evidence of a former life. Gone. Petra. Michael's voice through the door. Coffee's ready. She stood, smoothed the green skirt, and checked her reflection. Auburn hair neat despite the long day. Cream blouse still pristine. A woman who had always lived here, looking exactly as she should. She opened the door and went back to her kitchen. Later, when the family had gone to bed and the house had settled into its nighttime breathing, she found herself alone at the oven again. Its light glowed soft and golden through the door window. She approached slowly. Her hand hovered over the handle. "What are you?" she asked. The oven didn't answer. It was simply an appliance, stainless steel, electronic controls, perfectly ordinary. And yet she understood, in some wordless way, that touching the handle again would finish what had already begun. The last traces of Peter Morrison would dissolve like frost in morning sunlight. Her fingers brushed the warm metal. "Thought I heard you talking." Michael stood in the doorway, pajamas and glasses, yawning. "Couldn't sleep?" She pulled her hand back. "Too much gravy." He laughed and accepted a glass of water, leaning against the counter in the easy way of someone entirely at home. They talked about the deep-fried turkey disaster from several years back, the fire extinguisher, the foam, the Chinese takeout that became its own tradition. "Thanks for keeping all of this alive," he said finally. "This house wouldn't be home without your cooking." He rinsed his glass. "Night, sis." Sis. The words settled into place like the last piece of a puzzle. She had been his sister for 13 years. Would be his sister for 13 more. She turned off the kitchen light and padded to her bedroom. The green skirt whispered across the floor. Tomorrow she would wear the navy one. She knew this without checking the closet, with the white blouse with the tiny flowers and the earrings that matched perfectly. She lay down and let the darkness come. In it, faint as radio static from a distant station, she could almost hear a man's voice, someone who had climbed a porch steps one October morning with papers to sign and a life waiting for him somewhere else. But with every slow breath, his voice grew quieter, replaced by the soft, reliable knowledge of recipes and family birthdays and the proper temperature for roasting root vegetables. Sleep arrived eventually, bringing dreams of endless warm kitchens and the people who fill them. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. She had always been exactly where she was supposed to be. Morning came with Dorothy's gentle knock. "Breakfast in 30 minutes." She rose, dressed in the navy skirt and flowered blouse, brushed her auburn hair back, and walked to the kitchen. The breakfast casserole came out of the refrigerator. The oven preheated to 350. Coffee began to percolate. Cinnamon rolls rose quietly beneath a clean towel. Another meal taking shape beneath practiced hands. "Smells like heaven," Richard said, appearing with a newspaper. "How do you do it?" She smiled and cracked eggs into a pan. "Magic," she said. "The very best kind." Outside, the foreclosure sign that had stood in the overgrown yard was gone, posts, board, and all. Only 2 small holes in the ground remained, and soon enough, grass would grow over those 2, until there was nothing left to suggest the house had ever been in danger of being lost. How could it be lost? Petra Henderson cooked in its kitchen. She was woven into its walls now, as essential as the beams and the mortar. The house would stand as long as she stood at that stove, stirring, feeding, holding the family together with casseroles and unconditional love. She hummed an old tune she couldn't quite name, something absorbed over years of kitchen radios, and began planning Christmas dinner. There would be more people this time. She'd need a larger turkey. Perhaps 2. The oven hummed beside her, patient and warm, and she rested a hand briefly on its door. Without fear, without hesitation, the way you rest your hand on the shoulder of a trusted old friend.
Partners, she thought.
She turned back to the stove and kept cooking. She would always keep cooking. She was home.